Someone asked on Reddit, what is your biggest regret in life? Sometimes we unintentionally make such mistakes in life that we have to carry them on our backs for a lifetime. Here we go. Store 1.
Slamming the door in my mom's face and telling her to leave me alone. I will regret this for the rest of my life. For context, 10-year-old me and my mom had an argument about going to the grocery store with her. I didn't want to go, so I told her no. She wasted 15 minutes and gave me good reasons why I should go. I didn't want to hear any more of that, so I left in the middle of one of the reasons and went to my room, slamming the door as I walked in. I sat there as he knocked on the door and said he wanted to come in. I yelled and screamed at him, "Just leave me alone. I don't want to see you." He left and went with my brother. I fell asleep that night without thinking about anything, but when I woke up the next morning, I found out that my mom had to be rushed to the emergency room. Because of a pulmonary embolism in her right lung, she died 3 days later. And the last memory I have of her is me yelling at her and telling her to leave. God, I wish I could punch myself, and I'm still beating myself up about that night. His second favorite holiday was the day after he was announced dead. It's too bad because now every year I just relive that memory. I want to throw up every night thinking about it.
Store 2.
I cheated on my first love with someone he hated. It was the most despicable thing I've ever done. I guess the only positive thing about it is that it taught me what true selfishness and narrow-mindedness looks like, and I will never hurt someone like that again. We were long distance, it was hard, and we were estranged. His friend was soft and in retrospect predatory because he had cheated on his girlfriend too. I was young, and it was my first relationship. For real, I wasn't making excuses, it was just a background and context for my vulnerability. God, I just wanted to be wanted, and I gave in the worst possible way. Towards the end and afterwards I cried. The only thing I can say is that I told my boyfriend. He was really devastated. I don't know why he forgave me. I know they say once a cheater, always a cheater, but I don't believe it. I will never again make the microscopic, complex, and completely ruthless decisions it takes to cheat on someone. It was a life lesson. In a strange way, I am grateful for that lesson, but the biggest regret of my life is that I stabbed someone so deeply. There is no way to fix something like that, and I deserve every judgment that will come my way. I guess if I had to summarize my biggest regrets, it's every action that irrevocably shattered people's trust in me. Because I'll never fully get it back, and I deserve to live with that. But I owe it to them to learn from it.
Story 3.
For me, it was going to a strip club. I was exposed to plus 18 videos at an early age, and I would always pass by a strip club when my mom would take me to the grocery store. This made me curious, and one day when I met my friends at a restaurant, I passed by a strip club and I left right after I ate. That got me interested in that whole world. My father was a lifelong functional substance abuser, and my siblings and I seemed to have that predisposition. My parents warned me not to get involved with drinking and substances and said I was too vulnerable to becoming addicted. However, dealing with behavioral addictions became my Achilles tendon. Going to strip clubs and dealing with sex workers completely destroyed my self-esteem, self-image, and that kind of thing. While I was getting clean and abstaining from these activities, I met a girl with whom I had a really deep connection. However, her inexperience really scared me, and I ended up ruining that relationship. This was because of the vulnerability that being in a relationship entails and the risk that comes with love. It was also because I had spent the previous 2 years having transactional experiences with sex workers. But it's not all bad, because my own experience with addiction led me to forgive my father for his addiction and understand how it affected our family before he passed away suddenly 2 years ago. After his passing, I lost myself for a while, and that's when I met this girl. Self-sabotaging this relationship was a wake-up call for me, and what I would say is that it's never too late to change. It's never too late for a second chance. I took the time to work on myself, to work on my goals, to journal, to meditate, and to read. I began to truly understand myself and the world around me. While it was bittersweet because I missed this girl deeply, I was not in the right place to be in a relationship. Dealing with grief and dealing with these behavioral addictions, things are slowly but surely getting better for me. Our regrets and bad experiences are what make us who we are, even if they hurt. And in the process, I am learning to forgive myself and be patient because recovery takes time and is not linear. I hope this helps someone because, unfortunately, this kind of addiction is not uncommon.
Story 4.
I never had a genetic test before my son was born. I grew up normally. I married my husband, with whom I had been dating since high school. We had a beautiful daughter, then 4 years later, we had a second daughter. 6 years later, our son was born. He was perfect. At 1 year old, he was babbling, crawling, and almost walking. Nearing his second birthday, he stopped walking. Within a few weeks, he lost the ability to crawl and even sit up on his own. After an exhausting and stressful few weeks, we got our answer. He has an extremely rare terminal genetic condition called Krabbe disease. When two parents are carriers, a child has a 25% chance of developing the disease. We were devastated. We fought for him, and last year we traveled 10 hours from home for 6 months, away from our other two children and our jobs. And we got him a stem cell transplant because they said he would die by the end of the year. We tried to get him into a gene therapy clinic, but he was excluded because he had a certain antibody. I know that having genetic testing may have changed things, possibly causing my children not to be born, but it is so hard to see my little boy go through this. He can still smile, babble, and move his arms, but barring a medical miracle, he will never regain his lost abilities.
Story 5.
I made my biggest mistakes as a child, trying weed at 14, and also not being able to say no to boys who forced themselves on me. Weed doesn't have to be a transition for everyone, but it was for me. By the time I was 17, I had tried all kinds of substances except one, and men who I thought were friends at the time would get me high and take advantage of me. This was a frequent repetition for me. Fast forward to 27F, I never finished university, I'm still just a waitress, and more importantly, I was diagnosed with schizoaffective depressive type disorder at 21 because I didn't know when to stop taking a bunch of hallucinogens. Coke at 15, substances I used at 16. At the time, I didn't really care about them. I mostly had access to other things, so I decided to become a weed addict, taking acid every weekend. Then, after my diagnosis, I stayed sober for 3 years and became super Christian. But, once an addict, you're always an addict. My stepbrother cheated on me when I was 25 or 26. Then I went traveling for 3 months to try to cope. Came back and found out from my personal trainer that I was in love with someone I thought I could trust. But that was my mistake. You can't trust men or boys right away. I'm depressed and I'm on my psychiatric medication, but now I'm hearing more voices because I used white powder every day for 6 months, starting this February. And that led me to crystal being my substance of choice for the last 2 months. So, when all this is said, the thought of doing bad things to myself comes to my mind. I can't leave the house except to hang out with my boyfriend. I feel really sad that he is in love with me of all people. He respects me, he has never hurt me, and I was really lucky with him. He is sweet, charming, etc. I can't help thinking that I don't deserve any good things and I can't keep any good things in my life. It's just a negative thought. I know that technically I can. All this happened because it started with weed and I couldn't defend my consent. In fact, if I had been able to go to a Catholic private high school instead of a substance-addicted public high school and suddenly become popular with the girls I met throwing parties at my house, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So, if I could go back in time, I would change the environment I grew up in. I wouldn't talk to the people I grew up with. I would never have tried hard drugs. I think putting a kid in a healthy environment is the best way to guarantee success. Just like putting a child in a bad environment is the best way to make their life difficult as an adult.
Story 6.
Inability to stand up to bullies at school. What stems from this problem is a persistent, negative sense of self-worth, decades of severe depression and anxiety, and the consciousness that no one cares or loves me. I tend to let people walk all over me when the stakes are high, just to keep things the way they are. I also tend not to take very good care of myself, and this prevents me from dealing with a chronic illness that will eventually take over my life. I was not supported. Teachers did nothing except for one incident, and the only parent I lived with said I should never fight, whether it was to defend myself or not. And I had maybe one friend who was not there when the bullying happened. I don't blame my friend at the time for anything. When I was being bullied, I passed on some of what I got, and that is one of my two biggest regrets in my life. I did wrong, I was useless, but most importantly, I think I learned from it, overcame it, and became a better person. Most of the time, I hope that my ridiculous actions don't have a negative impact on others. I never bully, and when I see bullying, a switch is flipped, and I can't help myself. Doubly so when it involves children or animals. I tend to be very defensive and play my cards close to my chest, keeping my thoughts to myself and not letting many people into my life. I have a very small but close circle of people that I have been friends with for a long time and don't deserve. I have tried very hard to be a better person despite what I have been through, but I can be a real smartass online when the right buttons are pushed. Otherwise, I try to be helpful, supportive, and positive. Bullies, and there have been a few, don't live rent-free inside my head, thank goodness. But when they do get inside my head, I vacillate between hoping they have a really good life and fantasizing about hunting them down for a slow and long revenge, knowing they'll never see it. I strive for the former, but I'm only human.
Story 7.
I spent my 20s pursuing a career that was never going to work out, at the expense of everything and everyone. I wanted a writing career in video games. I started freelancing as a games journalist and was able to find a job stable enough to make it a day job. But the pay was never enough and the hours were always too long. Eventually, I got a job as a story designer for a small MMORPG. The pay got a little better, but the hours got longer. When things got the worst, I was easily working 12 hours a day and was still being told it was not enough. I neglected my family, my weight increased, and my finances were in shambles. After about 2 years, I was fired from that job and couldn't find enough work to keep things going. I had to move to a more standard office job. I was initially heartbroken, but the years since then have seen me working more reasonable hours at a more sustainable pace. I miss the sense of creative purpose I had before, but I deeply regret the years I spent hyper-focused on a goal that could never care as much as I did. These feelings have only intensified as I've seen the games industry become an increasingly horrible place to exist. None of the people I worked with then are in that business anymore. They are all stuck because of an inability to pay the bills or employers with unreasonable and unviable expectations. Whatever your goals are, whatever you think your passion is, don't let them become all you are. Success is not guaranteed, and even when you achieve it, it is often volatile and fleeting. Give yourself the space to be a full human being, to make connections, to be nice to people, and to explore other interests. The time you spend will never come back.
Story 8.
Failing multiple semesters in college and wasting thousands of dollars in student loans. My parents thought I was getting good grades the whole time, whereas I was more obsessed with having sex with my then girlfriend and drinking with my roommate than attending classes. College was essentially a hotel stay for me. It lasted 3 years. I paid for it by getting kicked out of school when my GPA dropped below 2.0 and losing my financial aid. A lonely and cold walk to the train station in February 2021 and a depressing train ride home eventually led to me falling into a deep depression for 2 years, during which time I was unemployed. Finally, something clicked inside me and I decided to take an entry-level lab position at one of the local hospitals, told my family what had happened, and have been saving for university ever since. I was able to apply to go back to university. Thankfully, I was approved. I am currently taking online classes and plan to return to campus for mandatory face-to-face classes in about a year and a half. My parents were supportive, even though they didn't like it at first when I told them the truth. My plan is to get a bachelor's degree in biology, then get a master's degree, and then take the MCAT. And my goal is to get into medical school, then do a residency and become a practicing neurological surgeon. I want to dedicate my life to serving others and helping those in need, and that's the way I'm most fascinated with doing it, even if it takes an extreme amount of time and effort. This was my first goal when I entered university at 18, but things didn't go as planned. Life gave me a second chance. My family gave me a second chance. I gave myself a second chance. And that second chance involved forgiving myself, redeeming myself, and improving myself. I did a lot of introspection, which I summarize by the fact that when I first entered university, I was very young, very unprepared, and very immature compared to now. I was a much colder, heartless, selfish, ungrateful, and uncaring person. To some extent, I don't blame myself because by definition, the human brain is not fully developed during the normal university years. It doesn't help that the least developed part is the frontal lobe, which helps with decision-making and analysis. I'm 26 now. I really feel much more mature than I did a few years ago. I didn't care about anyone or my future. Suffering, or rather experiencing the consequences of what I did and didn't do, taught me that the only way to live life is to do the best you can. So I decided to follow my dream path and go down the right path to build a future for myself and make life worth living with the lessons I learned. I am convinced that if I could turn the situation around and get back on the right path, anyone can do it. Hope is real, hope is strong, and hope is good. What I regret the most is how my parents felt, but it helped a lot that they decided to listen to me and gave me one last chance to make them proud. No one will love you more than your parents. Please treat them well.
Story 9.
I regret not retiring from the Army. I didn't realize what a good life I had. I didn't realize that this would be the only job I would actually enjoy. I have only one close friend who stayed in the Army. He is 3 years away from retirement, and I retired 15 years away from retirement. We are the same age. He says he's fed up and sometimes wishes he could retire with me, but he doesn't know any other kind of adult life, so he's not sure what he's missing. The truth is that he hasn't missed anything. He has a beautiful family, and despite all the hardships of 20 years in the Army, his life has been cleaner and more organized than mine, and I really envy him. I earn more money than I would have if I had stayed in the Army, but money only makes life easier. It has no effect on happiness. I will retire with a better pension than him, but he will retire young enough to do what he wants. He will have some time to start a new career. I am stuck inside myself, and it will take the rest of my good years. That's my only regret.
Story 10.
Becoming a doctor. The cost of medical school was not worth it. I sacrificed my entire 20s for education and training. I didn't get my first real adult job until I was almost 32. I've spent the last few years traumatized by my experience during the pandemic, navigating an unfamiliar and hostile job market. I'm far behind on life's usual milestones. I'm married but likely divorced, and the possibility of having biological children is unrealistic given my age. The catch is that a few years ago my mother was diagnosed with early onset dementia. I missed her last healthy years and her last years at home before she went blind and needed facility treatment. Early onset dementia is highly heritable. It falls under my subspecialty, so I know the data, and they are scary. And given my mom's timeline, I probably have about 15 to 18 more good years until I'm too disabled to work anymore. This will be exactly the year I qualify for student loan forgiveness. So, given that I'm a woman working in a low-paid specialty in a HQL district, we make more than $1 million less than our male counterparts over the course of our careers. I guess it's a good thing I don't have to save for retirement. I also don't like the medical system at all, and after several traumatic experiences, I don't want to practice clinical medicine anymore. But thanks to my student loan debt, I essentially have to work as a doctor, or at least make as much money as a doctor. If I can't keep up with them, I'm excluded from Medicare and Medicaid, and then all commercial insurance and my ability to earn any income is lost. So I am tied to a field I don't like and want to escape.
Story 11.
I have a poor ex-girlfriend who I created a human being for, so I have to deal with her. She often lists things I should regret, things I should judge myself for, probably things to regret, but I don't regret them because they made me who I am. They were all lessons and experiences that shaped me. For example, I'm not proud of being a substance abuser, but I overcame it. I met friends I had a deep affection for at the time. We made memories and formed bonds. Sadly, many of them died, and others separated us by staying sober. It could have been worse. It was horrible, but not worse. I have no regrets. I should have ended things with my poor ex much earlier, but I didn't. I don't regret it because maybe I needed that extra time to not go back. And now I know I don't want to be with a poor person again. And that feels great. I could have been nicer in high school, but I wasn't. I don't regret it because I was just a teenager trying to understand my feelings. I had people who accepted me for who I am, and that's great. I could have saved my money more or gone to college longer or taken less acid and skipped a few raves. I didn't, and that's okay. There's nothing I can do about what was done. All I can do is see and appreciate the beauty, even if it's just a sequence, and remember the darkness and use it as a light to guide me today.
Story 12.
My biggest regret is not being a better mother to my two beautiful, intelligent, unique children who are now in their 30s. My daughter went to North Carolina. I understand very well why, but I love and miss her every day. I have a good relationship with my son, but I know things could have been healthier when he was older. I am really very sorry. I have CPTSD and BPD traits from my own past. I decided to get a bachelor's degree in counseling and psychotherapy when I was 47 years old to improve myself and understand the dynamics and boundaries so that my behavior would be more consistent and healthy. I have also had a lot of therapy. I hope that one day my daughter will reach out to me. I respect her wishes by not communicating with her. I read on this site that some children with toxic parents don't communicate at all, and then wonder why their parents never communicate with them. I don't communicate at all with my own mother, whose last words were, "I'm sorry I can't be who you want me to be." That anger. At that point, he had to pick up his mirror. This is not about me, just some context. This is about my daughter, who I really love, miss, and worry about. Is there anyone else going through similar things? I admit that I've been terrible. Probably most of the time, unfortunately. I apologize for the length. The most beautiful, musically and artistically talented person I know. Strong and through no fault of her own, a fighter for people struggling in the world. I miss you. Always.
If you have a story you would like to share, please share it with us in the comments. Also, subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories like this. And don't forget to turn on notifications. Take care, friends.